See, it's not really a matter of your being more present in your life. Again, that's a language thing, right? It's really a matter of your being more absent in your life, right? Because the awareness that you are is always present in your life. It was never not present in your life, right? So what happens when you begin to apply the teachings of the truth is you become aware of that which isn't real showing up in your life and claiming to be you. You become more aware of that, right? So if you're suffering, you can use the application of the truth to your suffering and do what one of the greatest teachers called the practice of self-inquiry. And the reason one of the greatest teachers offered this practice of self-inquiry is if the truth is that the you that you take yourself to be isn't real, and because you take yourself to be this you that isn't real, you suffer, if that's the truth, and if the teachings and the practices are intending to end suffering, right, then what we're interested in here is your being able to be aware of your absence. And the more able you are to be aware of the absence of what you take yourself to be, the freer you are, the less suffering there is. So one of the greatest teachers of these teachings and practices offered us the idea of using a practice of self-inquiry. And you can apply the practice of self-inquiry as a way of interrupting the suffering that's occurring in your life. As a psychologist, I would suggest that that's probably the greatest form of intervention possible in your psychological suffering, is to use the idea of doing self-inquiry. What do I mean by that? As you go through your day, if you start to pay attention, you'll start to notice the suffering, right? What do I mean by that? It's the neurotic process that's going on in your head all the time. You know, that voice in your head that's telling you what it doesn't like, what it doesn't want, what it does want, telling you what you should be chasing, telling you what you should want more of, and telling you what you should be avoiding and you want less of. It's constantly doing that all the time in your mind, right? So if you're applying the teaching, right, as you go through your day, say you wake up in the morning and you had hoped that it would be a sunny day, and you were looking forward to doing something outside. You wake up in the morning and you notice that it's not a sunny day, that it is raining, and that it's windy, and the voice in your head starts talking to you about the day and saying, oh shit, this sucks, now what? What am I gonna do? Blah, 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 blah. So if you've been doing the practice and you've learned about the teaching, you could take the opportunity to look and see, okay, who is it that doesn't want this day to be as it is? Because remember, the source of suffering is very, very simple. This is not complicated at all. One of the reasons I like the Zen teaching is because it keeps it very simple, right? The source of suffering is the idea that your mental state has that life should be different than it is, isn't it? The voice in your head is always providing a narrative about where you're at in relationship to what's happening. In particular, it's a narrative about where you're at in relationship to what's happening in terms of not wanting it to be that way. You know, when I look in the mirror, I don't want it to be that way. Right? You know, when I think about my relationships to my family, I don't want it to be that way. When I think about how much time I have left to retire, I don't want it to be that way. All the I don't want it to be that ways that go on in the mind, right? So if you're practicing and you're applying the practice, right, when the voice in your head talks that way, what you could do is you could do self-inquiry. You could ask, for whom is this a bad day? Right? For whom is this a bad day? This is the application of self-inquiry, to stop and ask the question, for whom is this a bad day? And the answer is obvious, me, right? Me. For me, this is a bad day. And then the next question is the power question, and the power question is, who is this you? Who are you? Who am I? For whom is this a bad day? And who is this? And then the power question is the question that you do the looking, right? For whom is this a bad day? And then, who am I? And when you ask the question, who am I, you don't ask the question to get an answer. The mind may answer the question, but we're not interested in that, right? We're interested in the truth. The mind doesn't know the truth, right? So when you ask the question, who am I, you look. And when you look, you're turning your attention around and you're looking back to see the source of the attention. And you just look and you see. And if you look and you see, what you will see is nothing. That's the truth. Your absence is what you will see. There is no one home. There is no self. The you that they told you were, that gave you a name, that told you were a physical body, does not exist. Now, if you're new to the teachings or these practices, to hear a statement like that may not go into the system very easily. To hear a statement like that, it seems to be counterintuitive, doesn't it? It seems to not make any sense. What do you mean I don't exist? There's plenty of evidence for me existing. I have a birth certificate. There's plenty of evidence for me existing. I can look in a mirror and see myself, right? All of those ways of considering yourself to be real is the consensual agreement that humanity uses to keep the ghost alive. But you can't keep the ghost alive because the ghost doesn't exist. So if you do the looking, if you do the inquiry and you look to see, who am I? And you actually look to see what the answer to that is, not like an answer, but like seeing, like looking and seeing what's there, what you will see is there's nothing to see. If some people do the self-inquiry in the beginning of or practicing doing the self-inquiry, it may appear to be confusing because you may think that there's something that you're supposed to see if you look, right? But regardless of what you think about what you think there is to see, what's the evidence say? Look and see what's there. Actually look and see what's there. Every time you look and see what's there, you will make contact with the truth. You'll make contact with reality, right? You'll make contact with yourself. You'll experience yourself. And the self that you will experience is nothing. It's empty. It's consciousness itself. It's not a self like it exists as a thing. It is no thing, nothing, right? It only exists as an experience. The seeing that you're seeing is not being seen by anybody. It's just seeing. When you begin to experience your life as a verb instead of a noun, when you begin to experience your life as an activity that's occurring, a universal activity that's occurring, in the absence of there being a self, you will begin to experience being alive. And that'll be the end of suffering because there won't be anybody to suffer, right? You'll just be experiencing life. You will be life happening. Now, that's not going to happen tomorrow morning because you're here tonight. That's something that over time, it begins to become something that is so obvious, right? You don't have to seek it. You don't have to seek what you are. What you are is what's looking. One of the most famous sayings of one of the most famous teachers is, the greatest mystery, right, that there is, right, is being reality ourselves, we seek reality. That's called the Buddha seeking the Buddha. And being reality ourselves, we seek reality. Why would you seek what you already are? This is the cosmic joke, right? The identity that you take yourself to be would have you think, the identity that you take yourself will produce thoughts to tell you that you have to realize your true nature. It will do that. It may have already done that, right? But it's just trying to keep you in the dark. You don't have to realize your true nature. Yeah? Your true nature is already you. It will always be you. It always has been you. It can't be anything other than you. Even the thoughts that occur in your mind are consciousness appearing as thoughts. Your true nature is consciousness. That's the truth, right? And to the extent that you experience your true nature as this consciousness rather than the body or the self-concept called the personality, you'll be free from suffering. It's as simple as that. Now you have to deepen this understanding. That's why the teachings exist, right? The teachings exist so that you can use conceptual understanding as a way to point to this truth in many different ways, right? So that you can verify that it is reality itself. You know, one of the people that I like to listen to is Paul Hederman. How many of you have ever listened to Paul Hederman here? He's been at this for 30 years, teaching this for 30 years. And in my view, he's a master teacher. And the evidence for his mastery is how few people attend his meetings. Because most people can't take it. But if you listen to Paul Hederman, you'll get what I'm talking about. He has mastered communication about the truth. He points very clearly to the truth. And one of the things that he talks about in pointing very clearly to the truth is don't waste your time trying to realize your true nature. That's a waste of energy and a waste of time. Better that you should allow yourself to simply notice the truth. It doesn't take anything at all. It's already the case. It doesn't take anything at all. The truth is already the case. Right? But the mental activity will claim the experience that you're having, right? So according to the mind, right, seeing is happening. That's the experience, right? And then the mind says, I am seeing, right? What the mind does, what the head does, is it takes what happened after the conscious contact and says it was before the conscious contact. In other words, I was here before the seeing happened, right? But that's not true. The seeing is the first thing that happens, and then the head claims the seeing, doesn't it? Seeing happens, and then I am seeing, right? It happens after the conscious contact, not before. But the head will say, it was here before. I was here before the seeing happened. You see, the head claims that you existed before the conscious contact occurred, when in reality, you only existed as a concept that happened after the experience itself. You have to have patience and persistence when it comes to these practices and teachings, because the mind will resist hearing it. Because if the mind hears these teachings and practices, right, it will use whatever it can to deny that it's true. It will use whatever it can to distract you, to keep you away from it, right? Not because it's a lie, because it's a program, and the program that the mind is the program for the survival of the body and survival of the personality. Right? So what we're practicing here threatens the existence of this not real personality. Right? So the mind does not, the program that the mind is will do whatever it can to survive the existence of something that's not real. So you have to be persistent. You have to continue to come back again and again and be with the body and be with the breath. And allow over time the experience to solidify itself, to allow the experience of your true nature as awareness itself, right, to become something that's obvious. The truth becomes obvious through practice. You can wake up in the morning and be aware of the fact that you're the awareness of the thinking, not the thinker of the thoughts. You get that? You can wake up in the morning and be clear that you're the awareness of the thinking activity, not the thinker of the thoughts. And then you can practice during the day to come back to that again and again through the practice of self-inquiry. Every time something happens that disturbs you or upsets you, ask, to whom is this occurring? And the answer is always the same, me, right? And then ask the question, who is this me? And then look. It's the looking that's the powerful thing, because it's the looking and seeing the reality and the truth that there is no such thing as the self. And the program is a mental condition that gets passed on from generation to generation. And nobody questions it because it's got agreement, right? When you're born into the world, you're born into 8 billion people that all agree on what reality is. You don't stand a chance. They all agree on what reality is, and you get brought up into that, and you get hypnotized into that, right? And you're living your life as the body and living your life as the personality, and your life is a life of suffering. It has to be that way. As long as you take yourself to be separate from everything else in the universe, how can you not suffer? It's obvious, right? The good news is that's not the truth. The good news is that's nothing but a belief. The good news is there's no such thing as an experience of yourself as a personality. There's no such thing as an experience of yourself as a personality. There can't be, because there is no personality. It's nothing but a concept. It's a self-concept. That's all it is. I mean, we talk about it as a self-concept, right? But we don't allow ourselves to understand a concept isn't real. A concept isn't real. What is real is an experience that is happening all the time. It's not happening to anybody. It's just an experience that's happening. And when this becomes the way you're living your life, when this becomes your way of being in the world, you'll travel lighter. Life won't be so heavy, right? Because you'll realize you're just the actor playing the role in the movie. It's not real. The mind is generating this movie all the time based on your prior conditioning. And you're a character in the movie, right? You're not outside of the movie. You know, if you're in a movie theater looking at a movie, right? And one of the metaphors that I've used here in this class is I've talked about the fact that when we go to the movies, we consider that entertainment because we know what's on the screen isn't real, right? And then when we talk about the metaphor a little further and we say, okay, if you know that what's on the screen isn't real, if you know that what you're seeing that's appearing as the world, right, is just an appearance, it's not actually real, right, then you're free from the effect of that the way you would be free from looking at a movie when you're in the movie theater, right? But the thing you have to add to that is the you that's in the movie theater looking at the movie is part of the illusion. So if you think that there's a you in your seat right now that understands what I'm saying about what you're not, the one in your seat that thinks that understands about what you're not doesn't exist either. That's how the mind will use, right, your conditioning to play games, right? You say, you're going to become enlightened now. You're going to realize that you're not real. You're going to realize the self isn't real, and you're going to be free from suffering. Right? So you're an enlightened person, right? That's just more bullshit. When I say there is no self, I mean there is no self. And if there is no self, it means that you can travel lighter, right? It means that nothing can happen to you. It means you can't die. It means that you're not the body, you have one. If you think you're your body, it's like thinking you're your car. And when your car gets a flat tire, you suffer, right? That would be crazy to think that you're your car, right? But we don't think it's crazy to think that we are our bodies, even though there is no evidence that that's the case. If you want to do an inquiry on that, look in the body and see if you can find yourself. Nobody's arguing with this. The evidence is clear. Nobody's arguing that there is no evidence within the body that you're inside the body. Nobody's arguing that because they can't prove that that's the case. People think that they're behind their eyes, looking through their eyes, right? There's nothing there. There's nothing there, right? So if you do an inquiry in your body, you cannot find the self in the human body. There is no such thing as a self in the human body. All there is a thought process that claims there is. You get that? All there is a thinking activity that claims that you exist within this body. That's the only evidence, is thinking it. That's the only evidence. Other than that, there is no evidence that there's any self within the physical body. You know, this may sound to people who hear this in the beginning as crazy talk, right? That's crazy talk, there's no self in my body. That's crazy talk that I'm not real, and so forth and so on. That's only because you have been indoctrinated and hypnotized to believe in the consensus. That's all. Yeah?
Is consciousness in the body?
Right now, allow yourself to be aware of your entire body. You can do that, right? Allow yourself to be aware of your entire body. Okay? Right. If you're aware of your entire body, how can your awareness be inside the body? That's the proof. The experience, if you can experience your awareness to be that which everything shows up in, your body shows up in awareness, does it not? Not only that, the entire universe shows up in your awareness. That's pretty radical. And that's experienceable. Is that a word? You can actually experience the entire universe occurs in your consciousness. And then what would that indicate that you are? And what did they say? What did they say in Catholicism when they were torturing me as a child? About what are the characteristics of God?
He's everywhere in omnipresent.
Yeah. Starts to get interesting, doesn't it? If the entire universe occurs in my consciousness, maybe I'm the source. Maybe I'm the source. And maybe the source is not just me, but it's me and you. Maybe we're the source of reality. It's pretty radical.
So consciousness basically uses the body to have the body interpret it into a physical, you know.
The brain interprets to the body of which it is a part. The body, from a consciousness perspective, is just transportation. That's all. It just allows you to play the game of time and space as a separate self called a human life. This is a game we're all playing together. It's not serious, right? If you take it to be real, it gets serious and gets heavy, right? But if you get free from that and you experience the truth, right, which is all that you ever have to experience is experience itself. It's not happening to anybody. Then it can be exciting, you know. So you gotta keep coming back to this, you know. You gotta keep coming back to this. You gotta keep tapping the well. You gotta keep coming back to this and keep learning more and more about these teachings and do these practices over and over again, and then it'll start to have an effect on your well-being.